suddenly the gunshots, you heard tut, 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 whereas they dared to pursue us down part of East London. Shots were fired. One of the key words that we use at Global Telemetrics is it pays to invest in security. Gunfire. Prime example, do you recall the Lamborghini that we got recovered in the Netherlands?
Can you remember your first recovery? So, hi Joe, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is you do?
Yep, I am repatriation investigator. I've been involved in vehicle recovery and asset recovery for over 35 years.
How did you get into the job?
I derive from an area in Birmingham called Spark Hill, which I refer to as being the jungle. So I've swung from the trees, I learnt the Tarzan chant, and I take it out with me on my daily basis.
What were the early years like in vehicle crime?
Early years in vehicle crime, I think that was really my upbringing, growing up in suburbs of the West Midlands, and depravity and social disparity, where crime was quite prevalent and it all being around you. So within that sort of scope, you learn the ropes, understand what's going on around you, and it was one of my learning curves of life's experiences.
What do you think's changed with car crime over the years?
Vehicle crime over the years, I think the type of vehicles that are being stolen now, the tools that are being used, but overall the modus operandi of taking a vehicle by whatever means, whether that be by still technical equipment, whereas in the early days it was a screwdriver. And again, you can sort of, from the 70s, when it was the Ford Cortinas, Ford Escorts, Astras and whatever, crowbar, people have just moved on now to electronic compromise and other gadgets which they use to steal vehicles.
What would you say are target vehicles at the moment that you see?
Target vehicles at the moment. Again, it's still your hot sports car, your four-wheel drives. Really what's in demand, what the public want, the criminals get.
That's crazy. Did you say you've been shot at as well?
Not in this country. There was an episode where we was in East London just prior to lockdown, where we just recovered a vehicle and the baddies mob-handed had turned up, thinking they were going to get the vehicle back, whereas they dared to pursue us down part of East London. Shots were fired, but fortunately, having the networks that we have, the police were waiting for them further on down the road into Essex.
Did you tell us that?
I do.
What would you say are common myths that you hear quite a lot about car theft?
Common myths in respect of a car being stolen, and I mean of late everybody assumes car theft is related to being stolen here and end up in Russia because of the turmoil that's happening, which is not the case.
Yeah, to be fair, we're going to ask you about that because we hear it all the time. We see it on our social media. Oh, it's in a container, it's gone. Do you find that's the case, or how do you find the thefts?
Vehicle thefts, it depends on what gang or criminal has taken it. So with that, it could be just a domestic crook. It could be the organised crime team. So again, it's where, they're getting the biggest reward for the asset.
And what tips would you give to car owners protecting the vehicle?
Well, there's a definite need for aftermarket security. one of the key words that we use at Global Telemetrics is it pays to invest in security. And when you pay to invest in security, you get what you pay for. And sometimes you don't get what you pay for, but we have managed to instill a ingredient within the pay to invest in security when you are investing in Global Telemetrics as to the necessities, and that being, one, you have a tracking device, you then have the resources and backup to deploy, engage, intercept and recover the asset, which is the main objective.
And you work a lot with the police, liaise a lot with the police. How do you find that?
Well, again, my accreditation for being a autocrime investigator, which I've had for a great many years, and my IATI European network of associates has always been at the forefront of ensuring that we've got a good working relationship with law enforcement globally. It's one of the factors that when we are dealing with organised crime, that we can engage with them and not have to go through the palaver, because the recognition of what our standard being to what we're trying to achieve, it's in no way being a domestic issue that we're trying to run after something for our own sake, and it is clearly in the matter and the means of disrupting criminality and being a priority. So having that working relationship with them, which we've established for numbers of years, and the new generation which we seek out to engage with, it's a partnership approach which we have overall, because whilst we're going out there addressing our issues, we're also doing the training of what the trends are and what our findings are too, but also reminding them of the skills from what we learned in the early days. Again, it's going back to the thing about that circle, the fashion circle, and they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, you can.
What would you do quite a dangerous job. What do your family think about the job that you do?
Well, you're probably already aware, and a lot of people also know, that members of my family are engaged with the same industry. I'm probably better at it than I am to a certain degree, because remember, everything evolves. And, I hasten to say, one of the members of my family who's at the forefront of it, I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of her, especially when you go toe to toe.
And we see a lot on social media now of people chasing their own vehicles, things like that. What would you say to people that do that?
Don't. There's too much of a consequence and a liability that goes with that. We've seen it more in recent weeks over here in Britain, where I think was somebody killed this week. I don't know what it was, or seriously injured, where they've jumped on a bonnet and been dragged down the road. It happens. People go into that no fear mode, and it just takes being knocked off the vehicle. A lot of the time, I don't think the criminals have the intent to kill, maim, or whatever else. But when you go into panic mode, again, it's that rat, who's trying to get away, and they're going to do what's necessary to get away. And unfortunately, sometimes the victim trying to hang on to the bonnet, saying stop, stop, stop. Well, anyone falls off that vehicle, cracks their head on the pavement or whatever else, it can be life-changing, if not life-ending.
If you could speak to people out there, what would you say to them? What's your biggest tip for people?
Biggest tip to anybody who's out there who's looking to protect the vehicles, take necessity security measures. We all do. But don't take unnecessary chances when it comes down to, your vehicle being stolen, first things first, dial 999. That's always what we encourage people to do. 999 first. Having the aftermarket security or aftermarket security products, these are the things which can detect your vehicle after theft. It's not going to prevent it in some cases, because a determined criminal will take what he wants. There's an old saying which, it goes back to when I was young: the money or your life, or your bold-headed wife. And these are things which you've got to bear in mind, which are a big consequence. It's not to try and say you're a chicken or you're a coward or whatever else, but self-preservation is key to it all. So as long as you've put the provisions in place for protection, let the rest that you've paid to protect it, pay to invest in security, let that then take its own measures, and hopefully you'll get your asset back, or it'll be recovered pending being forensicated by police and whatever else.
So you must have been in some pretty precarious situations over the years. Are there any that stand out?
Yeah, I don't really remember the one where we had that Volkswagen that had gone through North Africa. We'd tracked it all the way through Morocco, where it went into Mauritania. I was flown into Nouadhibou in Mauritania, where the vehicle managed to get across the Sahara Desert by the time we got there, and had gone into Bamako. So we had to take a flight from Nouakchott into Bamako, landing in there of a night time. Military all around us, very hostile to us. One of the things when you do go into certain parts of Africa is that you have to be inoculated for landing into the country, which we had, obviously. Having your visas into the country, which we had. Upon sighting the vehicles, working with the authorities at the time, which weren't really too accommodating, because one factor being is that corruption plays a big value in vehicle crime. And we suspected that this vehicle, which was one of many at the time, had been targeted by an organised vehicle crime gang, which, if you remember, there was numerous vehicles that we'd identified going there, but this was a live one. So we landed in the area to recover the vehicle, spent a night in the hotel, trekked down to where the location was, which was, I always remember, Bamako, the roads are red. That's all I can explain, red. When we recovered the vehicle, when the baddies knew that we were there to take it back, they conceded in the handover. I remember trekking up the road, and all of a sudden, over like a little hill, I could refer to it as a mountain, but it was never a mountain, it was more of a hill. Suddenly I saw a man standing at the top. It's like a film. You can only predict it. Just remember someone peering over the top. Suddenly the gunshots, you heard. I was on the phone at the time to the control centre, and I always remember just talking to the control centre as we was looking for guidance to get back out the country, back towards Mauritania. The border was probably only about 32 miles away. And whilst on the phone to the control centre, I had to put my foot down, because all of a sudden this bap started. And I'd realised immediately this was not fireworks, this was gunfire. So pulling away a little bit, I heard in the back of the car, what the hell's that? Well, they're actually hitting me now. Then suddenly I've got this four-wheel drive vehicle with two blokes in it, which I've caught in the back of the mirror, who are now following up the road and putting the foot down, trying to get the inside and whatnot. Bamako, I'll never forget. I came to a set of traffic lights and waited, but this four-wheel drive thing was catching up. And in panic, I decided to jump the lights. As I've jumped the lights, whistles have started to go off. And this was the police, which were on traffic stops, blowing the whistle. And at the next junction, the whistles are going off. It's all I can remember is whistles. But at the same time, this Jeep that was following us was shooting. The back window was going in, gone out. A few more, what I believe to have been bullets had hit the vehicle. I remember whilst being on the phone at the control centre, being asked, "What's that noise?" And there's no screaming, there's no panicking. It's just focus on where you've got to get to. It's one of the things which we've been trained in is to not panic. We're here to get away. And I said to the controller, "Don't worry, it's just gunfire." Gunfire? Gunfire? And yeah, it's gunfire. Not further elaborating to it, realising it was more the controller that was in more of a panic than what we were. So in order not to cause any sort of, what can I say, any more concern by the control room, had to terminate the call. But then still trying to get back towards the border, at the Mauritania border, getting out of there. When we finally got to the border, got back out to look at the back of the vehicle, and it was just pelleted with all the bullets that had gone through, no back window. I remember when we finally delivered that vehicle back to the, owner, insurance company, they said, "Look at my car." And I said, "Well, you're lucky we got that back," because I mean, it was just one of those tongue-in-cheek remarks that you give back and say, "Well, that's the best we could do," due to the baddies wanting to get retribution on what they needed to do, but the law of the land. And we've had different episodes similar to that, not probably so as drastic as that one. That was one of the ones which I do always recall vividly. So really, that's the only one, Mike.
And generally, obviously that's an extreme situation. Generally, how hard is it to recover a car from outside of the UK?
Outside of the UK, it depends where we are again. There are parts of Europe where there's a process that we have to abide by. And again, that's working with our partners and networks that we work with. That'd be law enforcement, attending there with the correct documentation, the process that we have to go through. It doesn't necessarily mean you get the car handed over to you. Car crime is a global issue. It's not just a UK issue, it's a global issue. Within parts of Europe, the process of recovery isn't as straightforward as turning up and getting the vehicle back. There is a long-winded process of seizure and a process through the courts to get release on it. Some countries are more protracted in that procedure than others. Some are quite straightforward. But again, it's making sure we've got the right documentation, that they know who we are. There are times where we get little hurdles, but we manage to overcome them. There's been very, very few occasions where we've ever had to concede, because like everything else in life, we can be fallible. And as long as we're happy to put that, our hands up and admit we don't win everything, but we win the majority. People respect you for that, for the honesty and integrity that you give the answer for.
So, obviously, recovering around the world is a costly job. How do you do it? How do you manage to do it?
Well, recovery first and foremost is that we've got to intercept the asset. Intercepting the asset, as we've already gone through, using the networks, using our deployment to get that vehicle secured. Prime example, do you recall the Lamborghini that we got recovered in the Netherlands?
Yeah.
Again, one of our partners over there secured the vehicle from a -3 multi-storey car park, having to use specialist equipment to get the vehicle out. That then obviously goes to a adjudication team that review it all and process to get the vehicle released. Upon its release, the repatriation team then will go out. The vehicle's recovered back to the UK, and it's then obviously restored either to the owners or the insurance company. In most cases, the way Global Telemetrics operates, as long as the vehicle's not damaged and it's in sound condition, that the customers usually want the vehicles back. They've been separated from the vehicles for far too long at that time. There are the occasions where the insurance have paid out, but if it's in the appropriate time, then they're reunited with the vehicle as soon as possible. The cost side of it, as we know, that's always funded by ourselves. And one of the things which people need to be aware of, the funding for repatriation and its services are done in advance. So the charge to the consumer for getting the vehicle back and the repatriation is done in-house.
So do you notice many differences since Brexit? Is it easier now? Is it harder then?
Brexit has not really been a problem for us, as we can go back to pre-EU days when we was having to collect a vehicle back in I think it was 89, 90, collecting a vehicle from France. And in them days, it used to take you a whole day to go across from Dover to Calais. And the paperwork you needed then was probably a lot more than what you actually need nowadays for vehicle clearance. But, times may have changed. Certain rules may have come back in and regulations, but it's inevitably we're bringing the assets back and we're crossing borders left, right, centre, wherever it may take us. It's not necessarily always ourselves that will be there. We'll sometimes use our partners to share the burden of bringing them back, depending on how far it is. But it's always in mind of affordability, cost efficient, and time being the essence.
So what do you feel are the biggest challenges and hurdles that you face when recovering cars?
We're here or in Europe?
Both, really. Here mainly.
Right. The main problem that you face is opinionation. People know better. People doubting you at times. And sometimes the good guys are somewhat worse than the bad guys. At least you know where you stand with the bad guy most of the time, because that's what you go in there for. But you don't expect that when you're meeting the good guys. It can be frustrating at times, but you overcome them hurdles.
And you said obviously you've been doing it for over 30 years. Can you remember your first recovery?
It was Ford Capri that had been stolen and the interior had been taken out of it. That's going way, way back. Then after, it was a Cavalier. And it just went on from there, really.
Do you see a retirement in your future, or do you think this will always be in your blood?
I've been involved in vehicle crime, as I said to you. When you've swung from the trees and you've learnt the Tarzan chant, it becomes your DNA. Vehicle crime is very, very close to my heart at the end of the day, and investigative recovering assets is something I can't necessarily just give up. It's the only thing I really appreciate and know. I'm like a junkie. When that phone doesn't ring, or you've been told you've got to go to, a family event or wherever else, you're forever looking at your phone. Same as the rest of my team. They're all doing the same. Half the time they phone up saying, is the radio not working? Is this not working? What's not, But again, the passion and drive that we have for doing what we do, same as the way Global Telemetrics operates. We set our stall out to provide that service that the consumer, the victim, has invested in.